Welcome back to News from the Host. I'm here today with Craig Doyle, Director of Key Accounts for CommScope. Thank you so much for joining me, Craig.
Oh, pleasure to be here,
Great
Gary.
to see it. So maybe if you can just say a little bit about your role as much. I'm sure many people know CommScope, or maybe they don't, but it's one of those companies that has had a lot of names, a lot of manifestations. My own, I remember them as AT&T. So maybe you can just give us a little background of
Yep,
what
absolutely. So CommScope is a US-based company, but present in over 100 countries around the world with sales, manufacturing, all the resources you require to do the R&D and manufacturing of infrastructure products for IT networks. Basically, yes, we've had a long history of being a conglomerate of companies. We typically grow mostly through acquisition. So CommScope acquired what was the legacy business from Lucent and Avaya in the connectivity business, but then over time have acquired other industries such as Andrew on the wireless side, and most recently the BNS business of the TE Corporation. So again, truly trying to stay focused on that infrastructure side, whether it be wired or wireless, whether it be premise, data center, or out in the fiber to the X environment.
So we've heard today at the global conference that the edge is everything, IoT is everything, from the skin to the tin. We've heard it all today. Obviously with the companies you acquired, it sounds like you're trying to play in the core and also depending on key acquisitions near the skin. Is that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the history of our business was primarily a mixture of both originally, not necessarily always by strategy. I'm sure leadership would kill me for saying that, but the reality was we did grow organically in various areas. CommScope historically was in the cable TV and the hybrid fiber cable marketplace. The business that they acquired from Avaya was an enterprise business for buildings, also for data centers. And then they acquired a wireless business in Andrew, and that business then really rounded out the different media that you can connect, whether it be at the core of your portfolio of property or data center, or whether it be touching the customers that have a location at the building premise for businesses or at the residential premise for that residential consumer market. And then really the other acquisitions that we talk about really are driving scale. So it's, yes, it can be great to have organic growth, but with acquisition you can take those steps to increase the scale and therefore provide viability for growing that business into the future.
And because you effectively own quite a bit of the transmission layer. I'm sure people don't know it, but a lot of the zeros and ones that transit across their networks, both on their local, their wide, and is probably over your products, including their cross connects and their data centers. Do you see a time where CommScope, the objective is to be the smart solution, the smart building, the smart data center, is that where you're going? Is that the ultimate, or is it all pieces? I mean, everybody's gone through these acquisitions. And everyone wants one screen, right? We want one window for our smart building. And is that the ultimate objective?
Well, I think CommScope have been very clear on our acquisition strategy around strengthening our core, so that core function that we have. We have made acquisitions and we have made developments in products that allow for smart or for intelligent, or a term that's often used now is cognitive. So actually using the Internet of Things or the building Internet of Things to allow us to provide a lot more context to decision making for businesses. Now, unfortunately, the reality is achieving that single screen to view everything is quite a complex process. It is absolutely achievable, but invariably there's no one company who can actually provide you that. It typically takes that ecosystem of businesses, those ecosystem of technologies to actually interoperate, work together, and then provide up some level of context.
And that's where we are now. It's so many different standards and stuff. So different tact for the next couple of questions. So you're obviously Irish, but you lived for a considerable amount of time in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you left Ireland 10 years ago and you came back a year and a half ago, I guess.
Yeah, almost. So we moved out to the US with CommScope and with my family in 2011 and spent six and a half years in the New York, New Jersey marketplace. A very exciting place to be, and we heard today in some of the conversation around the room about the comparisons between that US data center business
Yeah.
and the business here in Ireland or even in Europe as a wider scheme. And in reality, it seems to be the evolution of that data center business. So we're seeing that as the industry has developed from being private enterprise to being more of a co-location or a hosting or even to the hyperscale side of data centers, we're seeing that the requirement for where a data center should be placed is driven not by it being a data center, it's being what actually happens within the walls of the data center.
data.
So
The data
what is the
within.
application, what is the data, what is the transaction? So what we saw in the US was as the hyperscalers, as the very large enterprises started to grow their cloud or decentralized computing or decentralized applications, they moved into the environments. So they moved away from the New York, New Jersey to the Virginia or Loudoun County type data centers or the Utah type data centers.
Okay.
And really that would still allow them to really maximize their cost to value, cost to process, cost to store. But what it did was it drove that specialist data center that stayed close to the city centers, close to the big metros, into developing into more a mixture of private client, co-location, and then a lot of edge.
Okay.
And I think I see that trend definitely happening now in Europe, whether you go from the tier 1 cities, as they term them, but now looking at tier 2 marketplaces and seeing that tier 2 marketplace now has all the infrastructure, all the data center requirement that any tier 1 city might have.
That's
just the business's process may be slightly different depending on what city it's in.
And we spoke about that earlier. We spoke about the whole word's proximity. You know, proximity to the things is a data center. Proximity to each other, i.e. where the clustering of all of the different, and then obviously proximity to renewable energy is a third. That's what we discussed as the three types. And when you look at Europe now, does it feel like America 2-3 years ago, or is it very much, do you think, with I guess the globalization of the companies that are building and operating, is it equal? Does it feel like it's equal?
It's very equitable with regard to the product that's being offered, so that the solution, the service, the product that's being developed is very equitable because you do have that mix between those metro type data centers, like the New York marketplace, the Chicago marketplace, wherever that might be. You could compare that very comparably to London, Paris, Frankfurt. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The difference I would say is that the scale of space that the US marketplace allowed them to develop out these huge campus of data centers, I haven't seen as much of that yet.
Sure.
That said, you're now seeing that development thought process. So when you have countries or administrations or organizations that are willing to plan that far and ahead for their investment, that is now starting to be apparent in the way people are developing their data center portfolios and then how they're making land bank acquisitions for the future.
That's interesting, because I was speaking to one of your colleagues in North America, and he told me he was heading into a meeting to talk about 10,000 fiber points globally. Sorry, 10 million. 10 million fiber points in POP rooms or points of presence exchange rooms for a global client. 10 million.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing now is that in the past it might have been hyperscale or it might have been specific telecommunication operators that were at that scale. Now we're seeing that many different organizations have that requirement to dedicate infrastructure to what they're doing. And the reality is technology and the infrastructure that is created on the basis of technology is expanding. And density is very important, but then it becomes scale. So you're seeing environments inside data centers that would have been hundreds or thousands now becoming thousands or hundreds of thousands of connections. And that something is driving an evolution in the way companies build their data centers and also the way that they consider what is the white space that is customer bought, customer leased, or what is the back office side of that business. And that becomes very much a point of evolving the data center concept so that you can grow with your customer or just grow with your own success.
And again, a lot of energy guys we were speaking to today, and they work in a finite world. They work in somebody said they run at 25 miles an hour and the industry works at 100 miles an hour. It's quite extraordinary that nobody really knows how big it's going to be. Nobody really knows, because then a new application is brought in the market. So Craig, thank you so much for your time.
That's a pleasure.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
And we're delighted to have CommScope as always as a partner of Host in Ireland. You've been there for 3 years now, and we really respect it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.